glad to be here tonight. Like I said, I'm an alcoholic, and I got to be an alcoholic by drinking a heck of a lot of alcohol. My first sponsor told me, when you talk, you just tell what happened, what it's like, and what it's like now. I was raised in an alcoholic family. My real father was a Skid Row wino. My mom put up with his behavior until I was probably 2 years old, and then she booted him out. The last memory I had of him when I was a kid, I remember my mom screaming at him, and I was in the crib, and evidently he thought I was the bathroom, but he was urinating on me, and she kicked him out of the house and sent him on his way. And I was told all my life growing up as a kid that I was just like him. I was put down because of his behavior and things, and I managed to get through school, and I went to ship to Oklahoma. My sister and I lived with my grandparents because my mother couldn't afford to take care of us anymore. And before that, we had been sent to foster home because she just couldn't afford to keep us. We tried to do the best we could, my sister and I. We still rebelled a lot, and we didn't want to be there. And when the opportunity came to go to Oklahoma, we went. When I got to Oklahoma, I ran into my two uncles who were there, and I liked the hunting and fishing they were involved with, and ran around like an Indian, and wore bib overalls and no shoes, and just was kind of like a terror. And I managed to get through that situation, and then all of a sudden my mom decided to come down to Oklahoma and carry us back to Ohio again with my new stepfather. So we moved back to Ohio from Oklahoma, and my stepdad was a construction worker and drank heavily. There was four of us in a one-bedroom shack. By this time I had acquired two stepbrothers, so the two younger boys got to sleep in the house with my mom and dad, and my sister and I slept outside in a Nash Rambler, which the seats fell back into and made a bed. We slept out there in the wintertime, and it was pretty damn cold. And in high school, I did pretty well. I got a job. I decided that if my mom and dad couldn't buy me clothes, that I would get my own, and I got a job in a bowling alley, setting pins. And I did okay in high school. I didn't get into any trouble or anything. I mean, being a man and getting out with the girls and stuff, you need a little courage. And so we started drinking this 3-2 beer, and it was the worst stuff in the world. I swear to God it was. It was like, I can still taste the stuff today, and I haven't had a drink of that stuff in a long time. I started working for Ford Motor Company at the time, and shortly after that, and I worked on an assembly line because I was an assembly plant in my hometown. I started bowling a lot, and then run out around after the leagues were over. I'd stay out, and I had a girlfriend that got off work at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be pretty tired, so I'd be sitting at my mother's kitchen table, and she'd always fix me breakfast, and she'd wait up until I came home. She'd say, "You son of a bitch, you're home?" I said, "Yeah," and she'd fix me something to eat. And I would always seem to fall into the food. But where I worked at Ford Motor Company, in the job I had, you could work up the line. Well, I would work up 10, 15 minutes ahead. I'd crawl into a parts rack, go to sleep for 10 minutes until somebody would come by and kick me. Then I'd work back up the line again. I did this all day long. And by the time 4:30 or 5 o'clock had come, I'd be ready to go again. When I got to be 21, then we got into the hard stuff. I never got into too much trouble, but I was just crazy. I was the kind of guy you saw in the bar that sit by himself, look at the mirror, and turn into Clint Eastwood by 2 o'clock in the morning. Just wait for somebody to challenge me. I just was belligerent. I had a couple of girlfriends at the time, and so I'm drinking like crazy, and then I had a new car, and then I got drafted. I got drafted in 1963. We didn't really do any drinking in basic training. Graduated and got out of there, and from there I went to Fort Sam Houston, Texas for medical training down there. We were being trained as medics to go to Vietnam. Then I got orders to go to Fairbanks, Alaska. Immediately found that they weren't paying me enough money in their service to drink the way I was accustomed to drink, and the booze was high up there, so I had to figure out a way to make a little extra money. I met this black guy that was on my ward, and says, "I'm leaving pretty soon. I'm going to be shipping out, and why don't you take over my barber shop?" Sure, that sounds like a good idea. So I rustled up a barber chair, and I was making pretty good money. I'm drinking pretty heavy at the time, and I would open up the barber shop in the morning, and I'd have my little sobering up drinks to try to get the shakes down so I could cut hair. I started getting shakier and shakier, and these first 3 or 4 guys that come in the barber shop in the morning, it was like bloodletting time. Nobody died, but a lot of people lost blood. I got out of the service with honorable discharge and went back to Ohio. I started working back at that Ford Motor Company, and I had met these nurses from Cleveland, and they were going to California to start a new life. And I was dating one of them, and they came out here to California, and I came out for a visit. Went back, told my boss I quit. He said, "What?" I said, "I'm going to California." He said, "Oh, you'll be back." And I said, no, I won't. And he said, yes, you will. And so I came out to California with no job, and I had a little money, and I moved to San Diego, where they had a place called the South Bay Club, and it was a kind of a swinging singles place, and single people were only supposed to live there. And I went over there and spent about a week with this girlfriend that I had, and she didn't want anything to do with me, and I said, that's fine. I don't care. I think I died and fell into heaven anyway, and there was a lot of women around there and a lot of free booze, and every night they had a party at that place. And I was dating these nurses, and the one didn't want anything to do with me, so I says, okay, I'll just get the rest of your girlfriends. And I got to 3 or 4, I think, and then I ran into this girl. Her name was Margaret. We were having this party, and I was dancing with her, and she says to me, I want you. And I said, what are you talking about? She says, I want you. So she got me, and I asked her to marry me, and she said, okay. And I said, when? She says, December. And I said, oh, my God. But I married a woman, and we had a nice life. She was a good lady. And 7 years later, we went through divorce, and that's kind of how I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I bought a house. I had 2 cars, a dog, parakeet. And I didn't know how to be in a marriage. I had no upbringing on how a marriage should be, how to give and take. And I was greedy and needy and drank. She enabled me my behavior a lot of times. As soon as I walk in the door, there'd be a Manhattan there. But she left, and I figured, well, she'd come back, And I said, give yourself a couple of months to think about it, and then come on back. And she never has been back. I don't think she's coming back. When she left, I started drinking pretty heavy. I was getting to the point where I was hearing the telephone ring. I'd be out in the yard cutting the grass. I'd go inside and answer the phone. Nobody be there. This guy that was living across the street from me, his name was Tony, and he was my first sponsor. He was instrumental in getting me in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we got to talking about my ex-wife had left. He says, I'm going to Alcoholics Anonymous. He says, here's some literature. He says, maybe you have a problem with alcohol. And I said, yeah, okay, fine. So I says, take this test and see if you do, and if you don't, we'll check back with you in a couple of weeks. I'd go in right straight in my house, and I don't want to talk to that guy across the street because he's in AA. So finally, one day, he came over, and he says, how you doing? And I got to talking to him a little bit, and he says, did you take that test? And I says, no. I didn't take the test. I said, I looked at the questions, and I thought they were a little tough. And he says, well, my wife and I are we're going to go to a meeting tonight. And he says, why don't you go with me? I says, okay. I'd do anything to shut him up, get him off my back. So I went to this meeting, and the only thing I remember about that meeting is that everybody was smiling, their teeth were all shiny, and there was a little homosexual guy running up and down the stage with a big mother-of-pearl fish hanging around his neck. And I'm saying, oh, my God, we really hit the big time here. And I'm standing in the back, and I'm sweating like crazy. I wanted to get out of there so bad I couldn't stand it. And finally, he comes out, and he says, hey, let's go. I says, let's get the hell out of here. He dropped me off. He says, what do you think of that meeting? I says, it was great. I lied through my ass. And I got an offer to come up to L.A. to work. And I moved up to L.A. on the weekends. I'd go down to San Diego and stay in my house. And so they called me and told me it was an emergency for me to come down, and that Tony had been killed in a car accident, and the family needed me to be down there. And I went outside at Tony's house, and I went out the back door, and I was standing outside, and about that time, this hummingbird comes up and looks me right square in the eye. They fly right up to my face. Now, I don't believe too much in reincarnation, but that was the weirdest thing I ever seen. So I just understood that maybe that was him, and maybe that's the way it was supposed to be. I went to the funeral, and they had a 21-gun salute of the chiefs and stuff, and I never cried. All my life, I never cried. But I was standing at that guy's funeral, and I was bawling like a baby. And it was the best goddamn thing I ever did in my entire life, because he helped save my life. I was out with Tony's wife at the graveside, and this little bee landed right on my shoulder. I was saying, it's going to be all right, Henry. And I never had that happen either. And so I'm saying to myself, I don't know what's going on, but it's going to be all right here. I've been going to meetings and trying to be sober ever since. And so it was really hard for me to find a new sponsor. Then I met the Honeycutt. I love that guy. And I don't love too many people. I love Frank Honeycutt, and I like his sobriety, and I'm glad to be sober, and I'm glad to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we try to suit up and show up, and I care about people today, and I care about me. It's tough sometimes, and I get angry, and I'm kind of a grouchy old guy, but I'm pretty soft in the heart too. But I do some crazy things around this program. I like having fun. You have to do whatever you're supposed to do in the right time or the right place. But I'm proud to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I try to do the best I can. Frank tells me some things to do and pray for people and stuff, and I have a hard time with it. And for the new people that are fairly new or whatever, and hang in there tough, and for the old timers, we'll hang in there tough too. But we stay sober a day at a time, and I'm just glad to be here tonight. Thank you.